Tomorrow's Election Day in Boston, and the predictions are in for a low turnout. That was definitely the case in the preliminary election, when ballots in most of the city showed only the candidates for mayor. Tomorrow's ballot will also have candidates for city council, with competition for 3 seats being left open. To remind us of some reasons for getting out to vote is the founder and executive director of the New Democracy Coalition, Kevin Peterson. Thank you very much for being with us.
Good to be here, as always.
First, I want to start with your reaction to the worst news in September, which is just how few people wanted to come out and vote.
I describe it as tragic news on the civic front. So sad that even during a mayoral campaign, where several mayoral candidates were vying against each other, turnout was critically low, embarrassingly low for a city like Boston, which has such a rich civic history and legacy of political engagement across the neighborhoods. We fell way, way short on September 26th, but we're going to try to do better.
Because another thing we should do to put this in context is that if you look farther back, you will see over the past 15 years at least, a tremendous growth in the number of people in Boston who are registered to vote. And if you look at communities of color, there has been dramatic growth. And talk about why that growth is so important.
Well, the growth really extended from policies, motor voter law and early voter registration, and a great deal of work that's being done by advocate groups such as New Democracy Coalition. It is critical for that growth is critical for the city because it involves everybody in the city, in the civic process. And as the city has been diversifying, the city is now so-called majority, minority, people of color. The voting rolls have been diversifying and growing. The problem is getting those new voters, those communities that historically been low voting, getting them in the process, and that takes time. But it takes really dogged education and mobilization efforts by organizations and groups and the city of Boston for local elections.
Of course, what you're also going to be hearing, we've been hearing this several times over the past few years, is that for all the progress, we still have these divides, the racial divides, the economic divides. So some people are out there, they're discouraged. They say, well, why bother to vote?
Yeah. They got to think about the long term. Some of these issues, race, for example, has been with us since the founding of the nation. And there's been gradual but successive progress made. There's no denying about that. We've gone from slavery to full citizenship for a group of people, for example. So it is going to take time, even as new immigrants come into the city and grow in the city. A lot of young people of color are in the city who are turning 18. It will take a while. Some of the issues are structural. Now, we have to think about long-term in terms of civic education in our schools, for example. At Boston Public Schools, civics hasn't been taught since 1972. That's a number of generations that have gone through the Boston Public Schools who should be graduating at 18 with a diploma, but also as a registered voter and a deep sense of citizenship, which they don't have right now. That's part of the problem.
This is BNN News. We're talking with Kevin Peterson from the New Democracy Coalition. Kevin, as far as reasons to vote, yes, you prefer one candidate over another, but I guess the other reason is that...
The most important reason, Chris, is voting around issues. So if someone is passionate or interested or affected by the housing crunch or the cost of housing in the city of Boston, they should be going to the polls and electing that official who most appeals to their issue around housing, around public safety. There is a zone within the city, Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan, that sees a disproportionate amount of violence. If you're a black male of a certain age, 18 to 34, and you're murdered, you're likely to be murdered in Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan. So if you're a Latino or Cape Verde male, it's certain. So if that's an issue that's pressing, and it is pressing, then you should be voting for the candidate who most appeals to issues around public safety, who has the best community policing plan, for example. So the issues are more important than the candidates. I've always said that. We're always going to be disappointed if we go chasing what I used to call a messiah candidate who's going to come and make things change. Some people accused President Obama of being such a person some years ago. But it's a misnomer, it's a mistake to attach your your electoral passions to a personality. People should be going to the polls based on issues.
And one thing that I've noticed about elections in Boston, and this is going back even before my own time, is that no matter who wins, if there are a lot of people coming out to vote, that they have to pay attention to that.
They have to pay attention. When our city councilors go back into session in January, some of those decisions throughout the next 2 years in terms of their work together, along with the mayor, some of those decisions are going to be based on what communities have the most persuasive sway electorally. Does Hyde Park come out to vote more than South Boston? Does West Roxbury come out to vote more than Roxbury proper? Some of those decisions unconsciously are made based on those numbers that are in the back of the heads of those elected officials.
Now, we should mention there will be 8 candidates for the 4 at-large seats in the council, so everybody gets to vote on that. But there are parts of the city where there are going to be seats that are going to be left open. So there's going to be a new councilor, whether you live in East Boston, Charlestown, South Boston, South End, Chinatown, Roxbury.
New councilor in Roxbury. 2 very good candidates there. The people in that district, District 7, should be focusing on coming out to vote for the best candidate. There is a seat up in Mattapan, Dorchester, where there isn't a contest, Andrea Campbell. People still need to come out to vote her in or a write-in, but also need to come out to vote for the at-large seats. So it's important that even for the people up in Mattapan and Dorchester and part of Hyde Park, it's important for them to come out for this at-large race, even if they don't see a local district race in their neighborhood.
Any advice for voters to avoid snafus, especially maybe if they've moved recently, but still in the city?
Yeah, call the City of Boston's election department. I think it's 617-635-3767, I believe. Call them about your polling locations. The issue tomorrow will be that 12 polling locations have been changed since the last mayoral election. 7 of those polling stations are in the African American communities of color. That is problematic. If the Voting Rights Act were intact, it probably would be illegal if there wasn't pre-clearance. So tomorrow's elections for thousands of voters may be chaotic and problematic. Call the election department if there's any confusion.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Kevin Peterson from the New Democracy Coalition. In a moment, honors for community heroes. We'll hear about this year's fundraiser for ABCD.